Hello and welcome to lesson number 6, structures for all parts. Here we are in lesson number 6 of the 10 lesson course. Over the last few lessons, we focused on pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, and now we're going to put it all together in a well-structured answer for all the questions in the IELTS exam. Hello, my name is Jonathan. As you know by now, I've been leading you through all these lessons. And in lesson number 6, the outcome that you'll learn from this is how to master a structure within IELTS Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. You're going to learn how to use the PEAL method and also the IEEC method. Essentially, this means about making a point, and evidence, and explain, and also link as well. By applying these structuring skills, you'll be able to practice and organize your answers effectively for the IELTS speaking exam. As always, we will begin the lesson with a warm-up task. What do you know about structures? When you speak an answer in IELTS, do you have a structure in mind? There are 3 questions on your screen right now. I would like you to read those questions and answer them. As always, within this course, I would like you to be interactive and proactive with every task that you do. So do write down notes, do speak and record yourself if possible. Once you have finished, please come back to the video. Welcome back to the video. So, how have you reflected on how you structure answers when speaking English? And what do you need when structuring an answer for IELTS? Have you faced any challenges related to structuring your answers? If so, this lesson will be essential for you. Throughout this lesson, we are going to talk about how to structure your answer and how to stay on topic. Here are some key points that I would like to address. First of all, introducing and paraphrasing the answer and also the question itself. So begin your response by directly addressing the topic or question. This sets the context for your answer. Once you've got that first sentence finished, where you've paraphrased the question or you've introduced the topic, then I would need you to provide details and examples. So talk more about the topic and the question it's been asked. Provide details, examples, and explanations. This would add a lot of depth to your response, and this will give you the ability to showcase your language skills. Once you've provided details and examples, you can expand on your points that you're making, using those linking words such as furthermore, in addition, and you can transition between your ideas and create a smooth progression. Once you have answered it, you provided details, you've expanded. Now in some answers you can also conclude. In part 1 this is not so necessary, but part 2 and part 3 it will be a good practice for you to conclude your answer or to summarize the main points in the final sentence. Just a quick reminder that we have 3 parts in the IELTS speaking exam, and they all require a slightly different structure. The first part is a casual chat about everyday topics, and each answer will consist of maybe 2 to 5 sentences. Part 2, this is the cue card part, the long question. You'll have to speak for about 1 to 2 minutes. So it is a structured speech that is required. This is the longest answer of the exam. And in part 3, you'll have an in-depth discussion with the examiner. So it is important that you provide a logical structure to your answers and you present your ideas in a clear and coherent way. Here are some tips on part 1 structure. It is required that you do a direct response. Make sure you answer the question to begin with. You could say yes, no, you could even say I don't know. But the truth is you probably will know a yes or a no for questions in part 1 because they will be about yourself or something that is related to you, like your hometown or your family. As these questions are about yourself, you have to make them personal. So use specific examples about yourself. A third point, which is optional, you can conclude each answer with a sentence that summarizes or reinforces the main idea. However, this is more important for part 2 and part 3, as usually part 1 answers are very concise and a lot shorter. Remember, personal experiences and preferences are shared, so it makes the responses more engaging, so feel free to open up and talk about yourself. On your screen now are 2 example part 1 answers. The questions: do you enjoy cooking? And what kind of music do you like? As you see, there are answers there which are the right length in terms of answer. Also, there is a little bit of a structure there. You can highlight what you think is part of the structure, and I'll talk about it very shortly. Now I have bolded some of the words that I think is essential for the structure. For the first question, I begin with yes. Okay, I've answered the question and I've explained that I enjoy cooking. Cooking is a hobby I cherish. In the second sentence, I am telling the examiner why I like it so much. So I enjoy cooking, I've explained that I enjoy cooking and why I like it. I've also given a specific example about myself, about trying out new recipes on weekends, and it's a great way to unwind why it's so great for me again. So there's clearly a bit of a structure within this answer. Yes, and why, and some additional information. It's the same for the second question. I don't begin with the yes, but I imply that I mean yes. I have a diverse taste in music. I also go on to explain that I like Mozart and Beethoven, and additionally, I appreciate the intricate melodies and emotional depth of classical pieces. So I have explained that I like a diverse taste in music, and I've also used one example that I personally like, which is classical music, and then some examples of what types of classical music that I like. Remember, we're adding depth to these part 1 answers. Now we are going to do a task that will help you with the structure of part 1. Let's focus on the question on your screen. What's your favorite type of food? A very typical, common part 1 question. I don't want you just to answer it as you normally would. I want you to think about how you would structure an answer. Remember, this would only be about 20 to 30 seconds. But look at those 4 questions which will help you structure this answer. The first one, simply answer the question. Okay, so it could be a yes, it could be a no, but in this particular question, it's asking for a specific type of food. Add more details about the specific type of food and why is it personal to you. And if you can, finish with a final sentence that summarizes or reinforces the idea, or just one final comment that you would like to make. Once you've done 1, 2, and 3, you can then put all the answers together and you have a complete part 1 answer. Once you have finished this, please come back to the video. Okay, well done on doing the part 1 structure. Nice and simple. You just say the answer to the question, then you add an extra bit of detail, you provide an example that's very specific to you. Maybe you can reinforce your point at the end, and that's essentially it. Well done. I hope your answer to the favorite type of food was a good one. Now let's discuss tips for the part 2 structure. Now remember, this is the only part of the test that you have time to prepare your answer. So you can actually prepare your structure in the 1 minute before you answer the question. You are going to address the bullet points in part 2 question. You will always see how, where, who, why, and when. It's important that you answer these questions, but it is not important in what order you choose to do this. Even if you forget to talk about when or why or who, it's not a big problem as long as your English is, well structured and you're very good on the vocabulary and grammar side of things. Remember that your answer should be 2 minutes long. So it's not just about 2 or 5 sentences. You are going to be speaking in a monologue for 2 minutes in length. Make sure the answer links well together. So don't talk about one thing and then randomly talk about something else. Let's make sure that each sentence is linked to the previous one. And it's very important that you use those transition words. firstly, moreover, on top of that, and then this is what happened. These things will link it up very well. It's very important that you excel at storytelling in part 2. Make it engaging for the examiner to listen to you. So be descriptive, use plenty of details and personal examples as well. If possible, you can write down some advanced vocabulary, such as idiomatic expressions and collocations, in the planning of your answer. If you do that, then that's for sure can guarantee some really high level vocabulary in your answer. Try to put them in naturally. Here is an example of a part 2 answer. The question, describe a memorable journey you have taken. It would probably ask you also where the journey was, who did you go with, when did you go, where did you go, and then this is the answer that's on the screen now. Have a look at the answer, please read through it and see how it's been structured. I will then bold some words for you and explain my thinking behind the structure. The first part of the answer is always an important one, particularly in part 2. I've begun with, I'd like to share my unforgettable journey. I'd like to share. It's a very common expression that you can use, I'd like to share. Another one that you can use is, wow, I have been on many memorable journeys, but the one I'd like to talk about is. This is another expression that we can use. It just sets off your question in a very nice way. You've answered the question, you've explained that you're going to go straight and talk about a memorable journey. After that, of course, I've used a lot of advanced vocabulary throughout. I've used lasting impression, breathtaking landscapes, one of the highlights. These are good vocabulary to use, but also there is a link between each sentence. First of all, I'm talking about it being a solo trip, then I'm giving more information about the city Kyoto. I'm trying to do a bit of storytelling by saying one of the highlights, and I've gone on to talk about what made it so special, what I actually did, or why do I remember it so fondly. At the end, I've talked about how the journey broadened my horizons, it allowed me to immerse myself. It's a travel experience I will always cherish. It's a nice final sentence just to relate and bring it back to the question. It's talking about a memorable journey, and the last sentence is talking about why you will always cherish it. Now let's focus on doing the part 2 structure. This is task number 3. Please read the question on your screen. Share your favorite childhood memory. Now once again, I want you to not just answer the question, but think about the structure as you do the question. So first of all, start off by simply answering the question with an opening statement. For example, I like to share, or there are many I could talk about, but I want to discuss. This is a really good opening line for part 2. Then you want to link all of your answers and your sentences together, talking about when and where and who and how, what and why. And remember about storytelling. Make sure they all link together. Don't just say, this is when it happened, this is where it happened. Try to link it. And use those transition words to help you do that. On top of that, then this is what's going to happen. This is one of the highlights. Some expressions you saw in the example answer. Also, write down 5 to 10 descriptive words or idiomatic expressions or collocations and try to put them in your answer. Once you've done 1, 2, and 3, I would like you then to put all your answers together and you have a complete part 2 answer. Welcome back. So how did you do with task 3, the part 2 structure? Were you able to have a beginning, the opening statement? Were you then able to storytell and answer all those questions about who and where and why? Were you able to add vocabulary to those sentences? And were you able to link the sentences nicely together? Now, if you can do that, you're on a good way towards a very good part 2 answer. Well done. Finally, here are some tips on a part 3 structure. My first tip is to focus closely on the question, as they often involve discussing broader issues, offering opinions or providing explanations. Sometimes there may be some difficult vocabulary for you to understand. Remember to provide a well-developed and thoughtful answers. So it's very important that you have a bit of a structure in part 3, more so than part 1 and a little bit more than part 2. So reasons, explanations, detail are very important. If they've asked you your opinion on something, you have to say yes, I agree, or I don't agree, and why. Explain your points. Even use evidence to support your points. Those transition words are just as important in part 3 as they are in part 2. So moreover, to illustrate, firstly, secondly, finally, these words will be very important. Now, you won't have any time to plan your answer, so it's not possible for you to write down advanced vocabulary. However, when we do the task in the next section, I do want you to write some vocabulary down. On your screen now is an example part 3 answer. This is the question. Do you think governments should take more measures to protect the environment? Why or why not? Take some time now to read the answer and highlight words that you think are important in terms of the structure and also in terms of making it a more advanced answer. Just like I did with part 1, you begin the answer with a yes or a no or I'm not sure, and then you explain the reasons. I definitely think governments should do more to protect the environment. That is me believing that they should do it. And I use the word definitely, so I'm more definite with my answer. I'm more assured of my answer. The next sentence, it's a big issue and there are several reasons why I believe this. This sets up the structure to your answer very nicely. Your answer for part 3 is always going to include a couple of reasons. So make those points and support it with evidence. There's a nice transition word, first of all, that's my first point. And I'm talking about if we all live on the planet, it can get polluted or damaged and it can affect everyone. For example, providing extra detail, when the air is dirty, it can make people sick. And when there's deforestation, it can harm wildlife. So I've explained how polluting and damaging the planet is not good for people and also not good for wildlife. Secondly, a nice word to use because you're also talking about an additional point. I'm talking about people and companies, they don't care about the environment, they just want to make money or save money, and they don't think about the long-term effects. So it's another point that I'm making, and it's an additional point to the first one that I made. And I finally summarize my answer, I relate it back to the question. So yeah, in my opinion, it's the government's job to protect the environment. So a bit of paraphrasing for the question to summarize my answer. So now let's focus on a part 3 structure. On your screen, there is a question. In your opinion, what are the most significant challenges that students face when pursuing higher education in a foreign country? First one, I want you to simply answer the question by expanding from a yes or no. So just saying yes or no is okay, as long as you expand on that point. Set up your question nicely. So you could talk about there being several significant challenges. You could say, maybe there's not many significant challenges, but that first sentence is key. It sets up your structure for the rest of the answer. I want you to think of 2 or 3 points. In this case, you're thinking of maybe 2 or 3 significant challenges. Use details, explanations, and evidence to support your points. Remember to use those transition words, so going from firstly, secondly, or in addition, on top of that. And if possible, add that advanced vocabulary to your answer to boost your score. Unfortunately, you cannot write this down in the actual exam, but you can write it down for this task, and this will help you for the future. Once you've done questions 1, 2, and 3 together, you can then compile your answer and it'll be a complete part 3 answer. So, how did you structure your part 3 answer? Did it have a nice opening statement? Did you talk about the things that you're going to discuss? And when you discussed them, did you use examples and evidence to support your idea? Were you able to use those transition words? And did you use advanced vocabulary to really elevate your score to the highest level? If you did all that, well done. We have another task for you to do. What did you learn from this lesson? There are 6 questions on the screen right now, and I want you to answer it to reflect to see what you've learned. So it's going to ask you about questions part 1, questions in part 2, questions in part 3. How should you respond to them? How can you transition from one idea to another? How should you begin part 1, 2 and 3? Are they the same or are they different? Once you have finished, please come back to the video. Welcome back to the video. Hopefully you participated in this task very well and you were able to identify what is needed for part 1, 2 and 3. And hopefully your focus on how to structure your answers has been developed throughout this lesson. Well done. We have one final task for today. Let's bring it all together. So look at the questions on your screen now under number 1. We have a part 1 question, a part 2 question and a part 3 question. I want you to provide answers for all questions and understand the difference between each structure. So write down or say your answers and then see if you can explain the difference between part 1, 2 and 3. This is really our first time that we can really practice doing these questions. But of course, in the future lessons, there's going to be a lot more opportunity for you to practice. Don't worry too much about everything now, grammar, pronunciation and vocabulary. I just want you to mainly focus on how you structure the answer. And remember, your part 1 answer should be about 25-30 seconds, part 2 should be up to 2 minutes, and part 3 is closer to 45 seconds to 1 minute. Once you have practiced those 3 questions, come back to the video. Welcome back. How did you answer those 3 questions? How did you structure them? And can you identify the difference between all 3? Well done on doing the structuring throughout this lesson. I hope you have found this lesson very valuable and useful for you. As always, between now and the next lesson, I want you to do some self-study. So there are over 500 questions on the Immerse English website and to see how the answers are structured. The more you revise, the more prepared you will be. So do check out that online content, whether it's Immerse English or whether it's somewhere else, it's absolutely fine. Review those notes and put into practice everything that you learned today. It's always a pleasure to teach you. Hopefully now you are more familiar with how part 1, 2 and 3 needs to be structured. Well done in today's lesson and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye for now.